and welcome to Monday the 20th of July. I'm Bronwyn Pearson from Pinnacle People Solutions, and welcome to our weekly Facebook Live update. For those who have been joining us for the length of COVID to this particular point in time, welcome back. To those who are joining us for the first time, welcome to you also. Delightful to have you with us. So our company, Pinnacle People Solutions, provides human resource services, advice, support, solutions, strategies, you name it, specialising in supporting regionally based small to medium-sized businesses and not-for-profit organisations. We are here to help you and your business, not only through these challenging COVID-19 times, but all the time. So please ask any questions that you might have as we go along with this week's COVID update. And I'll do my very best to answer those. So please pop those in the chat screen as we go along. Outside of this, you can contact myself and my fantastic team anytime via Facebook, of course, as we're up here, email, telephone, website, LinkedIn, YouTube, you name it, you can get hold of us. So we'll, there you are, look at that wonderful team has popped those contact details up there for you now so that you can use those. That's brilliant. So for those who have been following us for a little while, you'll know that we were doing these live streams daily because there was so much that was moving so quickly during the COVID pandemic that it was necessary to be keeping business owners, their managers and staff up to date on a daily basis. We have transitioned a few weeks ago to doing this now weekly on a Monday morning at 9:15. And please don't be concerned if you can't make it at 9:15 or if you miss it for some reason, because they're all saved. They've got an accompanying fact sheet and they'll be available afterwards up here in Facebook, but also on our website, on our YouTube channel, and also in LinkedIn. So you've got the opportunity to get up there and have a look at those afterwards. So our weekly Facebook Live update now, in respect of, particularly in respect of COVID as an employer advisory, is now happening once a week on a Monday morning. And so we're looking at breaking news and also big changes since last Monday, the 13th of July. So I just want to remind everybody, because, you know, when we can get access to dollars in this current environment, it's important everybody knows about it. So we still have available to businesses the $3,000 New South Wales State Government grant is open now. It's been open since the 1st of July, and small businesses and not-for-profits can apply for the Small Business Recovery Grant. So the grant is intended to help small businesses as they reopen from restrictions imposed as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. The grant is for safely reopening or indeed upscaling operations. So the kinds of expenses that you can use if you're successful in getting that funding would be things like marketing, communications and advertising, staff training, business advice and continuity, additional cleaning services and equipment, or fit-out costs associated with social distancing and digital solutions. So it's quite a wide net there that you can utilise that funding for. So you can only make those purchase or incur those expenses from the 1st of July. So you can't unfortunately go back to the expenses you might have used before then. The grant applies to wherever no other support is available. So applications close on the 16th of August. So to be eligible as at the 1st of March this year, you needed to have been a small business with an ABN, an annual turnover of more than 75,000, employ less than 20 full-time equivalent staff, be a highly impacted industry, and the link that our lovely team have put up there includes attachment A, which is the list of those in highly impacted industries, be able to support a payroll below the New South Wales payroll tax threshold of $900,000, and have experienced a decline in turnover of at least 30% from March 2020 to July 2020 to the equivalent period of at least 2 weeks in 2019. You are also required to declare your costs associated with reopening or upscaling as you anticipate that they may be. So I know I keep banging on about grants available, but I think it's really important for businesses to explore those and just see what you may well be eligible for. So let's have a look at this morning's COVID-19 summary as it may directly or impact those who are listening. It may well have imminent impact on those of us who are joining this morning. So first of all, there's been some developments, of course, over the weekend in respect of Victoria in particular, but also New South Wales, and I'm going to cover off some of those. But so masks or face coverings are going to be compulsory from Thursday in Melbourne and the Mitchell Shire in Victoria, and visits to aged care homes are going to be restricted across Victoria after the state recorded 363 new cases yesterday on Sunday. We're yet to see and hear from New South Wales and Victoria this morning as to what yesterday's tally was. There are real concerns at the moment that a second wave could hit New South Wales harder than it has in Victoria. We've, as of yesterday, had 18 new cases in New South Wales, and 4 additional cases were connected to a Bateman's Bay Soldiers Club exposure, which was reported late on Sunday, bringing the size of that cluster, which is separate to the southwestern Sydney cluster, to 8. Restrictions on the New South Wales and Victoria border will be tightened from tomorrow, so from Tuesday, with Victorians only allowed to cross for work, education and healthcare, and the categories of people required to self-isolate upon crossing will be expanded. So we'll provide some more information about that, but that's happening from tomorrow. Small employers, this is good news, will be given greater access to a $40 billion loan scheme to help them through the recession as part of the federal government's JobKeeper overhaul to be announced on Thursday. So in addition to this weekly Facebook Live update, we are doing a deep dive every Thursday via a webinar at 5:30 on specific HR topics. And this Thursday's webinar at 5:30 will actually be a deep dive into the economic and fiscal outlook that's being announced by the government on Thursday, including what support mechanisms are going to be in place post Job Seeker and JobKeeper, and indeed any changes that might be made to either of those programs in the lead up to their conclusion in September. So please tune in on Thursday afternoon. Again, it will be recorded so you can go back and have a look at it. But we will be doing that on Thursday, and indeed this we're getting drip fed, I think, this week in terms of some of the elements of that, the first of which was last week, which is the announcement about the Job Trainer program, and which I'll talk further about. And also we've had this morning, small employers will be given greater access to a $40 billion loan scheme, which will be part of the federal government's JobKeeper overhaul, which we'll know more about on Thursday and we'll profile in the webinar. There have been more than 14.3 million coronavirus cases now recorded across the world, and more than 600,000 people have died. So just in respect to unpacking some of that summary as to where we're at this point in time, I mentioned Bateman's Bay, which is, you know, the first location outside of Sydney that's recorded some recent issues. A pop-up coronavirus testing clinic will be open in Bateman's Bay, and because there are now 8 cases connected to the Bateman's Bay Soldiers Club, which has been closed for 2 weeks for a deep clean. The health authorities are asking that anyone who attended the club on July 13, 15, 16 or 17 is being urged to immediately self-isolate and get tested for the virus. So the pop-up clinic in Bateman's Bay will be in operation at Hanging Rock Oval Car Park near the Function Centre from 9 till 2 today. So that is open now until 2 o'clock for those who might be listening from our regional colleagues down south.
Josh Pearson or 3 others.
So we also, the Federal Treasurer has been in the media this morning on some of the breakfast programs He's remained fairly tight-lipped on the value of future income support payments, which everybody's trying to get him to divulge before Thursday, amid concerns, obviously, a return to old unemployment benefit rates will plunge people into poverty. So that's one of the concerns, that's around the job seeker payment. But of course, there are also concerns for JobKeeper, and certainly in the New England region, we had research recently that's demonstrated that 1 in 5 employees in this region are currently being supported by JobKeeper, and 1 in 10 on JobSeeker. So they're fairly significant numbers just for this immediate region, and I'm sure other regional areas are going to be similar. So despite we had early evidence, or not evidence, but early reports this morning that the $1,500 fortnightly JobKeeper payment will drop to $1,000 under changes to be announced on Thursday in line with the economic update. But the Treasurer has, in this morning's media, refused to place a figure on what income support would look like when the current JobKeeper and JobSeeker models are updated in September. So he's staying firm on the fact that everybody will hear at the same time on Thursday in the media, national media, as part of the economic and fiscal outlook, which we'll be profiling in our webinar at 5:30 on Thursday. What he has said, however, is that the economic turnover tests that apply currently to JobKeeper will likely remain in the next stage of support. The first detail, of course, as I mentioned in the summary of the economic support post-JobKeeper, has been small employers to be given greater access to a $40 billion loan scheme to help them through the resulting recession. And the government, ahead of Thursday's announcements, are being very clear that they have the nation's back and that they're under no illusions about the tough economic environment, etc. And also that the turnover tests, such as those currently in place for those who are eligible and receiving JobKeeper, were likely to continue to be the measure through which access to support is determined. So what changes, though, that might look like, we will know further Thursday, and we'll unpack for you on Thursday at 5:30 for our webinar on Thursday afternoon, live here on Facebook. So there are significant concerns for our colleagues in Victoria who recorded, as I said, 363 new cases on Sunday, that being yesterday. There's no absolutely clear sign that numbers are decreasing in Victoria, and we're yet to hear what yesterday's figure is as of this morning. But we do know that the mandatory masks that I mentioned earlier that come into place from first thing Thursday morning will be mandatory when outdoors in metropolitan Melbourne and in the Mitchell Shire. And Victorians have been warned they'll need to get used to it, that this is something that will be in place for the foreseeable future. Now, we have had that announcement in Victoria. We have not yet had any such announcements in New South Wales, but I think it would be a reasonable expectation that that requirement around mask wearing is likely to find itself being put into place in other parts of the country. So be prepared for that. So that is something to be mindful of. Obviously, Victoria will have some exceptions if it's not practical, particularly in some work settings, or if you're doing vigorous exercise. So I think there's been clarification that you don't have to wear a mask if you're running or cycling. You do have to have one on you, and it does have to be on before and after. And any face covering, including a scarf, will suffice, so it doesn't have to be a medical grade hospital mask. It can be a reusable mask covering face covering of some description. But people in Victoria will risk a $200 fine if they're out without one, in circumstances that they should have had one on according to the current all the restrictions that will be in place and expectations from Thursday morning. While the government in Victoria hasn't yet announced a move to stage 4 restrictions, the government has warned that it will continue to tighten restrictions if cases don't decline, and that has been mirrored in New South Wales. What Victoria is encouraging people to do is to achieve a high degree of compliance, and that will now include from Thursday people wearing masks or face coverings that are suitable and only leaving their homes for permitted reasons. That further restrictions would be less likely if that's the case. And good morning to Michelle and to Jess for joining us this morning. So the threats are there in terms of Victoria. And the other thing that is concerning and is also something that we need to be very mindful of in New South Wales and other states is that about 80% of Victoria's new cases since mid-May have been driven by workplace transmission, according to the government's interrogations of the numbers and where they've come from. Workplaces are becoming a big challenge for Victoria. Aged care is a major concern. Because there are now 216 cases of the virus linked to 40 aged care facilities in the state. And to ensure that people are abiding by physical distancing rules at work, officers from Victoria Police, WorkSafe and the Department of Health and Human Services will begin inspecting high-risk workplaces such as call centres, distribution centres, meat processing facilities, aged care, etc. And that if transmission of the virus continued in workplaces, then health authorities may make a list of which industries are and are not essential for people to be in the office. So we might see some further changes happening there in Victoria. There's also been concern expressed in Victoria about the level of casualisation in the aged care sector in particular, meaning that some people are working shifts in some aged care facilities and then going to others, and that's how some of the transmission is happening. There is federal funding that has been provided to residential and home care providers to make sure that staff do not work across multiple sites. This may well be something that we start to see happen in other states as well, but that has commenced in Victoria. To keep staff at one site, not allow them to work across multiple sites. So we'll keep you posted as to what that starts to look like, because there's every chance that it will start appearing beyond Victoria. The other thing of concern in Victoria is that regional Victoria's case numbers are growing. There's been 10 extra cases reported since Wednesday, and there are now 45 active cases outside Melbourne and the Mitchell Shire. The city of Greater Geelong, there's been 2 schools that have been closed this morning for deep cleaning. That area of Greater Geelong, which sits just outside the current lockdown area, now has 11 active cases. And there's other areas, including the Macedon Ranges, Golden Plains, Horsham and Greater Bendigo, that each have 4 cases. It's likely that you'll start to see compulsory mask use expanded to some regional areas in Victoria. It may well happen in other states as well. So that's why I'm kind of making a point of that I don't think it's likely to just stay in Victoria. Obviously, in the last couple of weeks, what we've seen almost daily is other states making entry from Victoria even tougher. And yesterday, New South Wales tightened its crackdown on people crossing the border. From midnight tomorrow, midnight Tuesday night, a strict border zone along the Murray River will be established to stop Victorians entering New South Wales except for extremely limited purposes. New South Wales border residents will be subjected to stricter restrictions on travelling into the Victorian side of the border zone. And if they travel beyond the border zone and further into Victoria, they'll have to quarantine for 14 days when they come back. So anyone with a permit to cross the border will have to reapply for it from Wednesday, and will only be issued the permit if they need to cross the border for work, for education, medical care or health supplies. Victorians are also facing further restrictions on travel to South Australia. And the South Australian Government has declared Tasmania, Queensland, the Northern Territory and Western Australia low community transmission zones. So Victoria and New South Wales are not in that low transmission zone. Everyone outside those zones entering South Australia must be tested for coronavirus within 24 hours of arrival and on day 12 of their quarantine, or face a $1,000 fine. The rules are retrospective, important to know, and include everyone arriving from Victoria, New South Wales or the ACT since the 8th of July, except essential travellers and children under 16. So with Victorians unable to get around the rest of the country, the Prime Minister has cancelled the August the 4th sitting of Parliament. This was after the Chief Medical Officer, Paul Kelly, said allowing politicians to come to Canberra was a significant risk due to increased community transmission of the virus in Victoria and New South Wales. The opposition have said they're not very happy about that, so I'm not sure whether there might be some alternates placed in respect of that, but that's what's happening. Federal Parliament sitting for the 4th of August has been cancelled. So in terms of the New South Wales Government and what's happening in New South Wales, the New South Wales Government has advised all of us as citizens of New South Wales against non-essential travel and non-essential social gatherings. So as I mentioned, Bateman's Bay is the latest cluster, and New South Wales health workers are trying to contain that cluster on the south coast, as well as still trying to grapple with the cases linked to an inner Sydney restaurant and a gym in the western suburbs. So we had 22 cases recorded in New South Wales yesterday, being as of Sunday morning. Yesterday morning, we're waiting to hear what this morning's is. It's not going to take much for New South Wales to end up in Melbourne's situation, so we've all got to play a role and be incredibly vigilant and not be complacent at all. So transmission in hotels and restaurants, gyms and social gatherings was a particular concern, and all of us, including those of us in regional New South Wales, are being urged to avoid non-essential travel and social gatherings. As I said, from midnight on Tuesday, New South Wales has tightened restrictions from entry from Victoria and into Victoria, and all non-essential travel to Victoria and the border region has been actively discouraged now by New South Wales Health. Under the current restrictions, 20 people are allowed at a gathering at home, but New South Wales urged people to take the extra precaution of limiting that number to 10. Where are we? Okay, so we've also got new restrictions, coronavirus restrictions that have been extended to cafes and restaurants from the 24th of July. The intention for that is to reduce the pressure on health authorities. And COVID-19 restrictions introduced to pubs will be extended to restaurants, bars, cafes and clubs from the 24th of July, which is this Friday. Those restrictions to pubs have now included extra restrictions in terms of contact information from patrons, as well as the appointment of a COVID-safe officer who is readily identifiable to all patrons. So I went to a local pub on Saturday evening for dinner, and that was exactly what happened. We had to scan a barcode when we came in, enter all of our details, use hand sanitizer, be guided by the COVID-safe officer, who was all in black with a high-vis vest, and that person was very visible throughout the venue on Saturday evening and very easily identifiable, and was making sure that social distancing was happening and so forth. So expect to see that, and that's going to be widened, of course. The restrictions include limiting bookings to a maximum of 10 people. It had been 20, it's now back to 10. Weddings and corporate events will also be limited to 150 people, subject to the 4 square metre rule. Funerals and places of worship will be limited to 100 people. And it follows similar restrictions announced last Tuesday for pubs after several were fined for flouting public health orders. The new restrictions are going to be particularly difficult for those obviously attending funerals, and people attending weddings and corporate events would need to remain seated. There will be no dancing, no singing, no mingling. Measures would minimise the risk of indoor activities which super spread the virus, and would take pressure off venues and health authorities by reducing the number of people needed to contact trace. What we do know on the positive is that work hours have started to bounce back for now. and data that's come out from PricewaterhouseCoopers and technology company Deputy has found that there are some sectors still struggling to increase working hours for staff. So we have seen, from April 24th, where there was a 78% reduction in hours in hospitality, that's now back to 33%. Retailers were down 49% in April, is back to only down 2% now. But we still have about 95,000 jobs in New South Wales at risk, which could be at risk if there's a second round of harsh restrictions. So we're all encouraged to be incredibly vigilant, both in terms of what we're doing in our businesses, as well as what we're doing in our workplaces, and also in our homes and in social distancing, and given the rates of community transmission that we're seeing. So real concern there that we need to be incredibly vigilant about. I'm going to give you some sort of advice in just a moment in terms of what I think we need to make sure that we've got in place. Just bear with me for a moment, because I am going to give you a bit of an update. So one of the things that has been introduced last week by the government, sort of their first announcement, if you like, in anticipation of this Thursday's unpacking of the economic and fiscal outlook and what modifications might happen to JobKeeper and JobSeeker between now and September, when they're due to end, and what measures might be in place after the end of those two initiatives, just bear with me while I bring this information up, is the announcement around Job Trainer. So what we do know about that, and it's important for any of you that are employing apprentices and trainees to know about this, that almost 200,000 apprentices will have their pay covered by the Morrison government, and school leavers will be offered free training under a $2 billion investment to support COVID-19 recovery. So on Thursday last week, the Prime Minister announced the expanded wage subsidy Job Trainer scheme, which is going to be worth up to $7,000 a quarter. It's the first element of the second phase of recovery after JobKeeper is phased out in September. We still don't know the fate of JobKeeper and the double dole payments. We will know more about that on Thursday, so tune in for our 5:30 webinar on Thursday afternoon, where we'll unpack what that means, announce what those changes are, and unpack what it means for business. But the expanded apprentice wage subsidy will now cover half the pay of up to 180,000 eligible apprentices until March 2021, up to a maximum of $530 a week. So for the first time, this program, which has been in place to this point in time for small businesses, will be extended to medium-sized businesses with less than 200 staff, as well as small businesses that are already covered. So about 80,000 apprentices are already being supported, and the extended scheme will cost about $1.5 billion between now and the end of March. The government is hoping, as the economy does go into recession as it has, that the new Job Trainer scheme will help support hundreds of thousands of jobs for school leavers and the unemployed. So it's also looking to, for both school leavers and those unemployed, to offer 340,700 new trainees and 180,000 apprentices free and low fee TAFE courses. So stay tuned for more information about that. As more information comes to hand, we will update you in respect of that. To be eligible for the wage subsidy, apprentices must have been employed by the 1st of July this year, 2020. Short courses that I mentioned that will be available will target skills shortages identified by the states and the new National Skills Commission, which commenced early July. And they will include training for jobs in healthcare and social assistance, transport, postal and warehousing, manufacturing, retail trade and wholesale trade. The National Skills Commission, as I said, which is getting up and running now and has been since early July, is envisaged to play a critical role in identifying current and future skills that will be needed in the economy in a challenging and changing labour market, as we're already seeing. So the intention is for the National Skills Commission to work with states and territories to develop a list of qualifications and skill sets that will provide job seekers with the skills that are in demand by employers and critical to the economic recovery. So that is what is happening with Job Trainer, the first of the initiatives to be announced last week ahead of this Thursday's big announcements. As I said this morning, the Treasurer was pretty tight-lipped about amounts, but has foreshadowed a $40 billion loan scheme post-JobKeeper for small businesses to access. We'll get you further detail on Thursday once we know more of what's happening with that. In the meantime, practical advice for business owners, their managers and their staff in this week's update is to make sure, if you do not have it already, have a COVID-safe plan in place. Get details of clients and customers coming into your premises. Make sure that you have all of the requisite obligations met as an employer when anybody's coming into your premises, if indeed you are in premises at the moment. Make sure you review your current staff arrangements now. For those who joined us for last week's webinar, last Thursday at 5:30, I answered that incredibly concerning question that a lot of businesses are asking, which is, are we heading for lockdown again? And I covered off the HR must-knows last Thursday's webinar, so get up and have a look at that if you haven't already. It's incredibly important to be reviewing your staff arrangements right now in terms of contracts, position descriptions and the policies and procedures you have for your business, because you may need again to pivot quickly. And if you do, it's important that all your ducks in a row so that you can move them nice and quickly and not delay. It's incredibly important that you keep communicating regularly and often with your staff about what's happening, what might happen. In the absence of communication, people fill the vacuum with all sorts of weird and wonderful things. It's important that they're hearing the information directly from you as the business owner. And they can often have really good ideas too as to how things could be managed moving forward through very uncertain times. So tune in also to our webinar this Thursday. This Thursday's is specifically dedicated to the economic and fiscal outlook and what it means for employers. We're expecting to know more Thursday with the government's announcements about economic support mechanisms post JobSeeker and JobKeeper, any changes to those between now and when they're scheduled to finish in September. So please join us on Thursday afternoon at 5:30 as we give you updates on that. In the meantime, thank you so much for joining us for this week's update. We will keep you closely informed, and we will be up here more frequently than weekly if the situation gets to a point where that's necessary. We will do emergency live Facebook streams in between the weekly updates if those are needed. So watch our Facebook page, subscribe. You can subscribe to our circulars. You can click the little bell in the top of the screen to be notified every time we're doing a Facebook Live so that you don't ever miss any. But they will all be recorded with a fact sheet and up and available afterwards for you to have a look at. So thank you so much for joining us today. Good morning, and thank you for those who've joined us this morning. We really appreciate that. I haven't had any questions in the chat screen yet, but feel free to send them through and we'll answer them and get in touch with you. If you want us to help you out in any way, you can contact us anytime via email, Facebook, all the social media linkages. All of that information is up in the chat screen this morning. I look forward to seeing you on Thursday evening for the next in our webinar series. Each of our webinars every Thursday is a deep dive into a particular HR topic, and once a month on our webinars we're hearing from our consultant psychologist Jessica, who's got some fantastic tips for you and strategies around maintaining good mental and physical health during this period of time. This Thursday we'll be unpacking the government's economic and fiscal outlook and what it means for employers. We're expecting to see, as I said, what the next stage of support strategies are going to be post JobKeeper and JobSeeker, and following on from the government's announcement of Job Trainer last Thursday. So please share that this is going to be happening with your colleagues, friends and family. You don't want to miss this one. It'll be really important to see what happens and what the impacts are going to be for employers. In the meantime, please hug the people that you're allowed to. Please wave cheerily at those that you yet can't. Stay safe, stay socially distant, stay vigilant with your hygiene. Make sure you've got your COVID safe plan in place for your business, and we'll look forward to seeing you for the webinar at 5:30 on Thursday. Thank you so much for joining us.